Hello, good evening, good day, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Ask Abhijit show. I hope you're all doing very well. And let us see who all is there on the live chat with us. Today is a live chat episode. Everything, all the questions I'll take from the live chat. So let's see. I can see Tanish, Mrinalini, Guru Kumar, Prajwal, Sarvesh, Guru Prasad, Gaurav, Mr. YouTuber, Keshav, Amogha, Pritam, Asmenor, hello, Siddhant, Arrow 14, Ajay Kumar, Akula, Harshpal, McLovin, Yes Az, Prachit Agarwal, Akshat Raj, Rupak Vadi, Mono, Jubal, Vivek Singh, Nara Joshi, Akshat, Rupak, Param, Prachit, Yas, Z, Ajay Kumar, Snehal, Sachin, Vinay Rai, Aniruddha, Srivatsa, Prashant, Tejo Meg, Harshal Sharma, Vivek, Baid, ZLNLX27, Vishwesh, Parthia Edits, Atul, Shrovan Malakar, Amit Mogekar, Yash, Red, Ratan Priyadarshi, Disha, Ritik, Karan, Prajwal, Arrow 14, Prixian, Anway, Akhil, Harley Davidson, Sabana, Megdeep, Vikrant, Nikhil, Raju, Anand, Mayuri, Jubal, Aditi, Bhanu Prakash, Yash, Tarun, Manoj Singh, Zubon, Izang, Pritam Sharma, and lots and lots of other people. Welcome all, and thank you so much for being on the live chat. So, in this episode, I will take questions only from the live chat. So, let's go. Ask your questions, and I shall take as many of these as I can. And I'm gonna do three live streams this week. It's kind of like in the old days when I used to do multiple live streams every week. So I'm gonna do three live streams this week, and maybe we shall continue that in the coming weeks. So please go ahead and ask your questions. Let us see. Okay. Vivek Bed says this might be the hardest question in your life. Is it Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi? No diplomatic answers, please. Who's the best? I think it's Lionel Messi. Both are tremendous players, of course, and both have achieved a lot. But Cristiano Ronaldo has not won the World Cup, and Lionel Messi has. So overall, I think I would go with Lionel Messi. I know it's a very controversial thing. Half the people will not agree with me. That's all right. Everybody has their opinion. Yeah, that's what I think about it. McLovin says, my views about the interview and the ad campaign of the US ambassador to India. Ah, yes, Mr. Eric Garcetti. He's been in India for a year, I believe, and he put out a extremely well produced video, which I have not watched. I watched the first 3 or 5 seconds of the video, and I just clicked away, I guess. So I haven't seen it. I've heard it's an extremely well produced video, better than what any so called YouTuber could produce, better than what most ad agencies would produce, but I haven't seen it. And I haven't seen his interview. So, no idea. I do not consider Mr. Garcetti to be a person that's very important or consequential. He, the US needs to have an ambassador in India. So, they have one. He is a political appointee. He's not a career diplomat. He's not somebody who has made a career in diplomacy. So he's not really that important. The real, when it comes to the India US relationship, it is run from the Pentagon and from the White House to some extent, and from the US perspective, and from India, it's Dr. Jaishankar who is implementing the Modi policy and so on. So Mr. Garcetti is just a figurehead. He doesn't really matter. Of course, his pronouncements need to be taken seriously because they represent the official position of the US and so on. But I haven't really bothered to see it. I don't think it's that important. I have not been interested in that. So that's all I can say about that. Okay, let us see. Okay, Herschel says when comparing France and Prussia, who was the strongest European power? Would 1871 Prussia beat Napoleon? I think it's hard for anyone to beat Napoleon when Napoleon was at his peak, at the peak of his powers. Napoleon was a force of nature. He was irresistible. And it took the combined might of the British and their allied forces to eventually take him down after studying him for a long time. And he actually lost because he tried too much too soon. He tried to grab too much in too little time. And also because he did not have the advantage of the power projection and the supply chains and all that that the British had globally. Not globally at that time, but yes, they had an extensive network of supply chains and all that. And they had tremendous power projection abilities, the British. The French did not have that. So, Napoleon, if he had taken the time to build that, then he would have been invincible. So, Napoleon at his peak, when he was, well, all over the place and defeating everyone, he was essentially invincible for some time at least. So, 1871 Prussia, could they beat Napoleon at the peak of his powers? I think that would be a little difficult, especially if Napoleon had the technological advances that existed in 1871. 1871 is essentially when the nation of Germany was born. The Iron Chancellor Bismarck was the founder of Germany, essentially. Even though he was never the ruler, he was, you could say, the founder and the force behind the unification of Germany. So I think that Napoleon at his peak, it was almost impossible for anyone to defeat him, especially if he had the same technological advancements, access to that as the opposing power. So I think it would be have been hard for Prussia or Germany of 1871 to defeat Napoleon of 70 or so, 65 or so years ago. Okay, Param Bhatnagar says, what's the best approach to prepare for succeeding in Indian competitive exams like NEET, JEE, etc.? Okay, competitive exams. I'm not a big fan of that, but let me tell you what it takes to succeed in any competitive exam. First of all, you need to know your subject really, really well. The basics, the fundamentals, the advanced stuff, all of that, you need to have a very strong grasp on that. Then that's not enough. It's not enough to know stuff. Yeah, you may know everything there is to know, and yet you may not do well in the exam. So how do you crack the exam, like they say? You take the past, I don't know, 300 years papers, uh, the last 5 years, 10 years exam papers, you get those and you solve them again and again and over again. That's how you do it. And if there are in the JE, I don't think, do they have interviews and all that? I'm not sure. Okay, I've not looked into that for a long time. But in case there are exams which require you to give presentations or sit before a firing squad, which is the interview committee and all that, you need to do mock interviews and prepare all that in advance. So you need to place yourself repeatedly in the environment and in the milieu of the exam. I mean, think about the armed forces. How do they prepare for war? They do war games. They practice. They do it all the time. Uh, they behave as if they're in a war situation, and that's how they do their drills and their practice and their whatever it is that they do. So you got to do it that way. So you need to know the subject very well, which means you need to read all the books that you may have. I mean, these are not exam practice books, but whatever. You need to read all the books. You need to know the subject very well, and then you need to do these mock exams. Take the last 10 years question papers or last 20 years or whatever's available and solve them over and over again within that time frame, whatever the time frame is, 3 hours, 2 hours, 7 hours, whatever it is, and do that over and over again. That way, you will have absolutely no fear of the exam. You'll know exactly how it goes. And then, as long as you know your subject really well, why would you not do tremendously well? So that's how you do it. Okay. Vishwesh Shukla says, why are no censuses being conducted? You mean in India? Maybe in India. I expect in India. The last census was in 2011. So the census in India is conducted every decade, every 10 years. And we know what the situation was like in 2021. Yes, the coronavirus pandemic. So it was impossible to do anything. The entire planet was essentially under lockdown, and yeah, it could not be done. So I guess the next census will be done in 2031, unless there are plans of doing it at some other point in time. It's always good to have a census and have a good understanding of what your population is like, what the demographics are like, and so on and so forth. But this was like they say, an act of God. There's nothing you could do about it. The country had to be locked down. Now we know that the virus wasn't that dangerous and all, but at the time, you never knew. You did not know what the virus was like and what it could do to your country. And it was imperative to save as many lives as possible. So that's why it did not happen. Okay, you cannot blame the government for not conducting the census in a situation where there was a global crisis. Nothing you could do about it. Okay. Parth Bhavsar says, what's going on in Pakistan occupied Kashmir? Are the news media 100% true in what they're saying? Well, I don't watch the news, so I don't know what they are showing, but I am aware of unrest and protests that are happening in various parts of Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So the locals in Pakistan occupied Kashmir are fed up with the Pakistani oppression, with the oppression of the Pakistan army, and the misgovernance, the lack of tolerable living standards, the lack of progress, the lack of development, and they can see what's happening across the border in free Kashmir, in India's Jammu and Kashmir. They know, they can see how much progress and development there is. Tourism is booming, people are doing well. The Pakistani terrorism has essentially been squashed. There are some sporadic incidents here and there, which they will keep doing, but overall it's tremendous progress in free Kashmir, and they can see the stark difference. So they are frustrated, they are fed up, they want a better life, and that's why there are protests, there is unrest, there's violence, there's demonstrations. Police personnel are being beaten up. I'm not sure if the armed forces are being targeted. Probably not, because the armed forces will respond with tremendous violence. The Pakistanis, that's how they operate. But that's the deal. So there's tremendous misgovernance in POK and Pakistan occupied Gilgit Baltistan. There's a very poor education system. There's no delivery of services, very poor healthcare facilities, very poor infrastructure, roads, whatever you name it, it's terrible in POK. So the people naturally are frustrated, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily have any great love for India. Please understand that. Okay. These are the same people who conducted those massacres in Mirpur and Gilgit Baltistan and all that in 47, 48. Okay. I don't think they have changed too much, but overall they are frustrated, and I'm not sure what they want. Do they think that this violence will give them better living standards and better delivery of services and governance? I'm not sure. Or do they seek independence from Pakistan? Do they seek to rejoin the motherland, India? I'm not sure, but overall it doesn't concern us. Okay. As Prime Minister Modi recently said, we have simply shut the door on Pakistan. Let them deal with their problems on their own. We're gonna go ahead and develop our country, and that's it. So yeah, that seems to be the situation overall. Okay. Pritam Sharma says, let us see what Pritam has to say. I quote the Dalai Lama: we are not seeking independence from China, we want to be part of China. What's my reaction, and what should be India's way forward, as we do give the people of Tibet safe havens in India? Look, the Dalai Lama, I think this is what he said, that we seek more autonomy, extra autonomy, or whatever within China. I think it's a kind of a practical, pragmatic statement. He's kind of resigned to the fact that he's in no position to change the status quo and that China is firmly in control of Tibet. So I think all he seeks is that the Tibetans get a little bit better deal, somewhat better treatment in Chinese occupied Tibet, because right now what's happening is cultural genocide. The Tibetan language is being erased. Tibetan kids are being forced to study in Chinese. They are prohibited from speaking the Tibetan language. The education system is entirely in Chinese, and there is tremendous repression and oppression. They're not allowed to have photographs of the Dalai Lama or to pray to the Dalai Lama. I'm not sure if they're even allowed to run monasteries. If monasteries exist, they are tightly controlled and so on. So it's tremendous repression. There is cultural genocide, and more than 50% of the population of Chinese occupied Tibet is now Han Chinese. The Tibetans have become a minority in their own land. So the Dalai Lama probably seeks some kind of compromise. He knows that he is in no position to change things, and that's why probably he made this statement. So what is my reaction? Well, okay. The Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, is a spiritual leader. To some extent, you could say he's some kind of political leader, but well, at this point in time, His Holiness the Dalai Lama does not really matter from the political and geopolitical perspective. Okay, because he is in no position to effect any real change in the world. He's a spiritual leader, and he's 80 plus. I hope he has a very long life, but eventually he will have to decide about his reincarnation as well, because that's how the institution of the Dalai Lama continues. When one Dalai Lama passes on, gives up the body, dies, he is essentially reincarnated in the body of a new child. And there are, the lamas and all, they look for certain signs and all that, which will identify some new child somewhere as the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. So the Dalai Lama needs to announce, I mean, he needs to make his intentions clear, whether he does intend to be reincarnated or not. If he doesn't want to be, if he does not intend to reincarnate, then it means that the institution of the Dalai Lama is over after once he passes on. Or he could announce that he will reincarnate whether in Tibet or outside of Tibet or within India. So he needs to, at some point in time, make that announcement, because, well, he's pretty elderly now, more than 80 years old, as far as I know. And yeah, so that is the situation with the Dalai Lama. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter what he says, because words are immaterial. China is in occupation of Tibet, very firmly in occupation of Tibet, and that is the root cause of the India-China issue. The Chinese aggression, which began with their capture of Tibet, with which Mr. Nehru allowed them to do and actually facilitated them to do, because he supplied the Chinese soldiers who were starving with Indian rice. So India, I think there is no big influx anymore of Tibetan refugees into India. The Chinese have sealed the borders essentially. Tibetans are no longer pouring across the border like they used to do in the 90s, in the 1990s, maybe early 2000s. It has more or less stopped. If anybody does come in, it's a very small trickle, if at all. So those Tibetans who have been fortunate enough to cross over into India, they have reasonably good lives compared to their brethren in Tibet, and that's where it is. So eventually, whenever the India-China issue will be resolved, the root cause is Tibet. The Chinese, the illegal, illegitimate, brutal Chinese occupation of Tibet. Once that ends, whenever it does, maybe next 20 years, maybe next 100 years, I don't know when. Let's see, whenever it happens. Well, that is going to be the solution. That is the only solution that you can have to the India-China border issue, because the India and China have never had a border. So the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, it's okay what he says, doesn't really matter overall. Okay. Tanmay Mittal says, do you believe we had divine weapons during the Mahabharat period? Look, do we have evidence of that? See, this is how it goes. See, Indian history is tremendously ancient. When you talk about Maharana Pratap, who lived just a few centuries ago, maybe when was that? 4 or 5 centuries ago, right? Maharana Pratap. People describe him as being 7.5 feet tall, and his armor was 300 kilos, and he had a 12 feet long sword, right? Do such human beings exist? Now, now I expect some people will get upset because I'm questioning that. Look, I'm sure he was a tall and strong and tremendously brave and valorous man, but I do not believe he was 7.5 feet tall. I do not believe that his armor was 300 kilos. I don't believe that his sword was 12 feet long. But today, because of his achievements and his tremendous deeds, people think of him, they picture him in that manner. That's just a few centuries ago. That's like, from the perspective of Indian history, it's day before yesterday. So when it comes to heroes of India, historical figures from several thousand years ago, just imagine how much their physical attributes and their capabilities and their weapons would be magnified in the mind's eye, right? So you always embellish your story generation after generation, and eventually somebody who was very valorous, very brave, very capable, who did tremendous achievements on the battlefield and all, they are given divine attributes. And we, of course, in India, in Hinduism and Buddhism, in all the Indian dharmic paths, we believe that we have some divinity within each of us, and some of us have more of it. Some of those who are lucky. So Shri Krishna, for example, the kind of things he did only a god could do that. So we regard him as an incarnation of Vishnu. The same goes for Sri Ram and so on. And then their weapons obviously become divine weapons, but it doesn't prevent them from being historical figures, right? So I am sure these wars, these battles happened using regular weapons. Okay, that's how I see it. Forgive me if you do not agree with me. That's how I see it. Maybe if there were heavenly weapons in those days, maybe that was not Kali Yuga and we are living in Kali Yuga. That's why there is no evidence of that left. But whatever it is, so I think that they were tremendously unusual people, tremendously exceptional people, and that's why their weapons and their attributes seem divine to us. And maybe they were indeed incarnations of the divine, of Lord Vishnu and so on. But this is how I see it. Please do not get upset if my perspective differs from yours. But do remember that I am the first to, I have the greatest amount of respect for our history, our culture, our civilization. The way we look at it can differ, but the respect doesn't change. All right, let's take something else. Okay. At the end of the day, the brain cannot digest facts, only stories. This is an incredible way to preserve our legacy in this world. I do not doubt the divinity. Perfectly, perfectly. I have no disagreement with that. Uh, this is a great way to preserve our legacy and the history and the stories. And feel free to not doubt the divinity. I mean, the things they did were, well, one could say divine, and maybe their weapons are also divine, right? Okay. Gaurav says, why is Biden, the US president, allowing massive scale invasion of his country via Texas and on the northern border, mainly Khalistanis? And this pattern is common in Europe, isn't it? Vote bank politics. Okay, let's because we're talking about the southern border of the US. Let's look at the map. So where is the US and which border are we referring to? Okay, this is North America. We are talking about the southern border. The southern border, and we're essentially talking about the state of Texas, the largest state in the United States. Texas, it's mainly Texas that is, facing the brunt of this invasion. So you have this tremendously long border that Texas has with Mexico. And it is, well, I don't remember, I don't have the exact figures with me right now, but over 2 million or so people have crossed in to the United States. Illegal immigrants have crossed in during the timeline of the Biden regime. So you can just walk into the US as long as you don't have a passport and as long as you are an illegal immigrant. If you want to migrate to the US legally, then you're going to have to go through a million procedures, and it'll take you 28 years to get a green card and another 63 years to get a citizenship. But if you come inside illegally, you will immediately get a nice hotel, you'll get nice meals, you'll get a driving license, and you'll get to vote. It's a weird country, and completely undemocratic and completely illegal. The Biden regime is essentially breaking the laws of the United States of America. Can you imagine that? There is this textbook definition of corruption. That is what's happening. There is no question about it that the Biden regime, the Democrats, the Democratic political party, is aiding and abetting massive, large scale illegal immigration on a continuing basis into the United States. Okay. So, why are they doing that? I don't know about the northern border, the Khalistanis and all that stuff, but yeah. So why are they doing that? I'll tell you why. In the US, you don't need to be a citizen to vote. You just need a driving license. A driving license. That's it. So once you come in and you get a job, or even if you don't get a job, even if you're on welfare so what happens is once these guys cross into Texas or whatever southern state they cross into, the Biden regime gives them transportation either by bus or by aircraft, domestic flights to various parts of the US, to big cities. And then they are put into various locations in these big cities. So if it's a Somali refugees who are coming in, they'll be placed in a big city where there are other Somalis. So they'll create a Somali enclave, a Somali ghetto. And all Somalis Somalian people will be staying there. So that's a vote bank. You see, and some of them are put in hotels. Some of them can if some houses and apartments are empty, which means the owner is somewhere else, they can just walk into that, squat there, and according to the laws of certain states, it's okay to do that. It's legal. And when the owner comes back, they can't get their house back, that sort of thing. So all these laws, especially in democratic states, are pro illegal immigrants and all, and the whole thing is essentially vote bank politics. So they are hoping to win the next election and other local elections using this tactic. It's horrific. And you are seeing this in Europe as well. I'm not sure what the laws in various European nations are like. Can illegals vote? But they can certainly alter the demographics. So yeah, it's a long-term demographic disaster for the US. All these illegals are coming in. There's no way they're going out again. And this is happening on an ongoing basis every single day. So you have Somalians coming in, you have people from various Southern American, Latin American countries coming in, you have people from the Middle East coming in, Afghans, Pakistanis, Indians, Chinese, everyone. As long as you throw away your passport, you can get in. You have your passport, you have to apply through the usual channels, the regular channels. So the best thing you do is the first thing you do is you throw away your passport at the border, you walk in, and then you say whatever story. Horrible. But yeah, that's a new world. Parthik says, what is feminism? Please explain. What is feminism? It's hard to define feminism, but let me give you a very brief overview of the history of feminism. Feminism essentially emerged in the United States in the, well, I don't know, 18th or 19th century. Let's say the 19th century. Look, in the 19th century, 18th, 19th century, the US is a nation. The US is an artificial nation created by settler colonialism, imperialism, land grabbing, and expansionism. Okay? And the majority population of the US are descendants of illegal invaders from Europe who conquered the land, killed off the natives, marginalized those who were left, and took the land and created a country. That's in brief. Now, these Europeans who came in and grabbed this gigantic continent sized land, they were all obviously, you know what the religion was. It was mostly Christianity, if not all of them were Christians. So you have these Christians coming in, and Christianity, well, historically, it wasn't the way it is today. Women historically in Christianity had second class status. I mean, look at the history of Europe in the Middle Ages, the medieval ages, even very recent ages. When did women get the right to vote in Europe? Hmm? I think in a nation like Switzerland, women got the right to vote in some parts of Switzerland in the 21st century only. Okay. So that's the kind of society and culture you had in Europe, and that's all thanks to Christianity. The pre-Christian native culture of Europe was very different. Women had very high status comparative to that of men. So women were badly oppressed in North America. To make a long story short, okay, they were essentially second-class citizens. They had no real rights. They had no right to property. They had no legal equality with men. They were essentially servants of, first of all, their fathers, patriarchy, Christian patriarchy, and then there were servants and possessions of the husbands. So it was terrible, and eventually there was a need to emancipate women from this depressing and brutal, life that they lived. So that was the root cause and the genesis of what you call feminism, which was initially a movement to bring equality, to seek equality for women as opposed to men. So feminism, I think, I I I'll have to check out the names and all. I forget the names of the ladies who were at the forefront of the feminist movement in the 19th century. I think they also allied with the black rights movements and all that in the 19th century, and it took off essentially as a powerful movement in the 1950s and 60s. and eventually it got hijacked by lefties, and today it's a whole different thing. Today they don't seek equality, they already have equality, now they seek superiority over men. So it's totally become warped, and the original intent and purpose has been lost and misplaced, and now it's all about putting men down in the US and in the West, in the entire Western world, and about dominating men, and about reducing men to second class citizen status. So there's a lot of misandry in the West today, and that's all thanks to this new warped form of feminism. So yeah, that's feminism, but I think it's a topic that merits a more detailed kind of exposition, and maybe I could do that in the future. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at this. Hitanshu Sharma says Five Eyes allege spying Australia, Pannu and Nijjar's murder links, Canada and the US, and vaccine side effect issues against India amid elections. Are these aimed at tarnishing Modi or India? The image. Okay, so the Australians in 2020 or something, they reported that they had uncovered a nest of spies in their country belonging to a foreign country. At that time, they did not specify which country it was. Now this year, I think they or I don't know whether it's the Australians or the US who are saying that it was India. So yeah, the Australian government is kind of saying that it was Indian spies who were spying in Australia and trying to infiltrate the Australian system and so on and so forth. That's what they claim. Do they have evidence? Have they provided evidence? No, obviously they have not. When it comes to this Pannu Nijjar thing, the Canadians and now the Americans also are claiming that India was behind this, and India. When it comes to this Pannu fellow, who is a known terrorist, who is sheltered and harbored and aided and abetted by the US citizen. Well, this Pannu fellow, uh, the US alleges that India tried to assassinate him, not assassinate, kill him, murder him on US soil. And according to them, that's a red line you cannot cross. We can kill anybody anywhere in the world, like Soleimani, like Anwar al-Awlaki, and whoever else, but no other country can dare do that to one of our citizens. We can kill our citizens, that's fine. So it's total hypocrisy, but there is no evidence that India is involved. They have been able to provide no evidence. When it comes to this Nijjar thing in Canada, once again, what's the evidence? You make claims. Where's the evidence? It's like saying Osama bin Laden who died in so and so day. Where's the evidence? No evidence. Then you have vaccine side effect issues. I'm not aware of that. I this is the first time I'm hearing of that, so I'll not comment about that. So these allegations that India has a massive spying operation in Australia, that India tried to kill American terrorists on American soil, or India is behind the murder of some Canadian gangster Nijjar. All of these allegations are, the objective is to first of all pressurize India in the media, pressurize India diplomatically. So you make these allegations, then you use them behind closed doors during diplomatic negotiations to attempt to arm twist India. Uh, that's the thing. And then obviously trying to create a narrative that India is an increasingly authoritarian nation. It is behaving like nations such as China and whatever, and Russia, because Russia also is known to allegedly eliminate traitors on foreign soil in various ways. China also allegedly perhaps does such things. So they're trying to categorize India in the same league as Russia and China and maybe North Korea and other authoritarian nations. And they also are painting an image that India's democracy is backsliding. That's something they've been doing for the past few years. So overall, what are they doing? Is this aimed at influencing the results of India's elections? Well, it won't work that way, and they also know it. The more you accuse India of doing such things, the more Indian voters will be happy with the government. That for the first time in forever, the Indian government is showing some guts, let's say. Right? So it's actually gonna increase the votes for Mr. Modi. So clearly, I think the West knows that the general elections that are currently ongoing are a foregone conclusion. Mr. Modi will win. One hopes. I hope he wins. And they also believe that he will most likely win with a big margin. So then why are they doing this? They are doing this to create a narrative and set the stage for attacking India and maybe taking some actions and some steps that are anti India during Mr. Modi's third term. So they're setting the stage for that. And when Mr. Modi comes into wins the election and comes back to power for his third term, they're going to start with this barrage of propaganda in the media that the strong man has won again, and they'll make whatever comments they want to make, and then they'll say that India is increasingly authoritarian and despotic and right wing and whatever terms they use, fascist and dictatorial and all that, dictatorial, yeah, and so on. So they are setting the stage for that. They're setting the stage. They're preparing this entire reception committee to attack the Modi government 3.0 after the election results are announced, June onwards. So you can expect the next 5 years, next 10 years to be increasingly rocky and difficult when it comes to the India-US relationship. And it's going to be the US that's going to increasingly apply more and more pressure on India in a variety of ways. See, the US, from the US perspective, India has limited utility. Let's go back to the map and let me tell you what utility I'm talking about. Where's the map? Where's the map? Here's the map. See, here's the map. I'm centering in the far east of India. Manipur, Burma, and all that. Okay, Burma is not part of India, but you get the point. So this is where you see India and China. From the American perspective, India has limited utility for them. The only utility for them of India is as a counterweight and counterbalance to China. India is the only nation in Asia that can stand up to China. And it's the only nation in Asia that China actually worries about and to some extent fears. Okay, the Chinese will not say that, oh my God, we fear India. They will never say that. But they do fear India, and that is betrayed by various actions and comments of theirs. So from the US perspective, India is a counterweight to China, and that's the only utility there for India. That's the only use there for India. But India is growing economically. India's economy is growing. And by 2035, if it keeps growing the way it is growing, India is going to be a new challenger on the horizon for the US by 2035. Once India reaches the 10-15 trillion dollar mark GDP wise or more, depending on the exchange rates, which will change, India is going to be the new China in the future. By 2050, if everything is fine for India, it's going to be the new China, and China will have declined by that time. So from the US perspective, India is a long-term competitor, adversary, threat, whatever they want to call it, and they're going to make it increasingly difficult for India to grow economically. So it's going to be a rocky road ahead for India. It's not going to be a smooth ride. The US is not going to be friendly with India. The only utility they have for India is as a counterweight to China. Okay, let us see more questions. Okay, Salimong Sangtam says, why has India been silent in the Ukraine conflict? Will India be trusted by other nations if there is another Indo-Pakistan war? Okay, good question. There's the Ukraine conflict going on since the 22nd, 24th of February 2022. I forget the exact date, 22nd or 24th, right? It's been more than 2 years. And India has not actually been silent. India has urged both nations to resolve their differences through negotiations, through diplomacy. Mr. Modi has said that this is not the time for war, we should not have wars, and so on. So India has urged both sides to try and resolve the matter diplomatically through negotiations. Go back to the negotiating table, sit across the table face to face, talk to each other, and find a solution. Try and achieve a ceasefire. That's what India has said. Beyond that, what can India do? And of course, India has its own interests. We are a growing economy, a rapidly growing economy. We are still one of the low income nations when you look at GDP per capita. Our GDP per capita needs to grow. Our people need to have better standards of living over the next 10 years. Our people need higher levels of prosperity over the next 10 years. everywhere, in every part of India. That will only happen if India's economy grows at a good pace. For that, for economic growth, you need fuel, you need energy. And the energy source, the number one energy source, is petroleum. So we need petroleum, and Russia is willing to supply India with tremendous amounts of petroleum at discounted rates. So why will India not take it? We cannot sacrifice our self-interest for the sake of vague principles. The US is also importing Russian petroleum and oil and whatever. I'm not the US, the West is doing that much more than India. But that's okay. If we do it, it's bad. So the point is this is not an Indian war. This is not even an Asian war. This is a European war. Okay, the Europeans will say that Russia is the Eastern nation, whatever. It's happening in Europe. And it's a proxy war between Russia and NATO, or rather Russia and the US. And the proxy that is being used is Ukraine. So this is not our problem. And I assure you that if tomorrow there is a war between India and Pakistan or India and China, none of the Western countries will do a thing or even pretend to come to India's aid. That is a guarantee. Take it in writing from me. None of them will come to India's aid. India knows this. India is anyway on its own. And when it comes to the relations between India and Russia, India and the West, I think the West has always been a fair weather friend, if a friend at all. I mean, remember the old days, the 20th century. The United States funded and financed Pakistani terrorism in India for decades. That is the kind of trustworthiness that they have demonstrated. And even now, they prop up Pakistan as a counterweight to China, just as they would like India to serve as a counterweight to China. And they also have a counterweight to Pakistan and Afghanistan. So that's the kind of games these people play. You think you can trust them? You cannot trust them. So India has not been silent when it comes to the Ukraine conflict. We have made it very clear that we are not in favor of this war happening. We would urge and insist that the nations find a diplomatic solution. But, well, that's all we can do. What more can we do? It's for them to find a solution. So I think when it comes to trust, India has done nothing that is untrustworthy. Okay, India has not betrayed any nation. India has not financed terrorism in other nations. India has not done coups in other nations. It's the West that does that. Okay, so there's no question of nations trusting or not trusting India. The trustworthiness of India is not under question anywhere. The global South trusts India. India recently brought the African Union into the G20. The G20 has existed for more than 20 years. Nobody bothered to bring Africa to the table and give them a seat at the table. India did that. India is the nation that does this and helps other nations in the global South. So India is genuinely trusted. Even in Afghanistan, even the Taliban trusts India, by the way. Okay? The Taliban doesn't have any ill will towards India, because India has never interfered in Afghanistan or tried to use Afghanistan as a proxy against Pakistan. India has never done that. So when it comes to the trustworthiness of India, there's no question about it. The question is, can you trust the West? And from India's perspective, whom can you trust? Can you trust the US? Can you trust the West? Or can you trust Russia? I think the answer is pretty clear. Okay? So yeah, there you have it. Okay. Satyam Gupta. What are your thoughts on the announcement of India having six aircraft carriers in the upcoming years? This was announced by the Defense Minister, Mr. Rajnath Singh, today. Okay. Map time. Where's the map? Here's the map. So, first of all, let's understand a fundamental rule of thumb, let's say, about naval activities. Let us say you have 3 ships. Okay, 3 ships. Let us say you have 3 ships. Okay, let me go to the map so that you get an illustration of what I'm talking about. Okay, let's say you have 3 ships sitting at the port of Vishakhapatnam. Okay, in the Kalinga Mahasagar or Kalinga Sagar, so-called Bay of Bengal. So you have 3 ships at the port, and you want to deploy these ships in the Kalinga Sagar, in the Sea of Kalinga. So the question is, can you deploy all three of them at the same time? And the answer is no. As a rule of thumb, if you have three ships, one will be actively deployed wherever you want it to be deployed, let's say over here. Okay. One will be at the port being refitted and restocked and uh, serviced. And the third one will either be going towards the point of deployment or coming back from the point of deployment. So if you have three ships, only one can be actively deployed at any given point in time as a thumb rule. So if you have six aircraft carriers, at any given point in time, two can be deployed. It is very hard for all six to be deployed, or even three of them to be deployed at the same time, because they need to be serviced, they need to be refitted, they need to be resupplied. They will need to go from the port to the place of deployment, or come back from the place of deployment to the port, and so on. So if you have six, you can deploy two, maximum three at the best of times. Right now, India has two aircraft carriers, and one is operational, one is being fitted with whatever it is. So from that perspective, having six is good. From that perspective, but one aircraft carrier costs about, let's say, $6 in US dollars. So if you're going to have four more, that's about $25 billion that you spend. Now imagine that you take that money, that $25 billion, and you buy submarines with that. Let's say one submarine, even if one submarine costs $1 billion, you will have 25 world-class submarines, which means at least 8 or 9 can be deployed at any given point in time. Now, submarines are invisible. They lurk deep in the depths of the ocean, very hard to detect, even with the best magnetic anomaly detector and whatever equipment you have. Very hard to detect. The true principal ship of every navy in the 21st century is the submarine, not the aircraft carrier. Aircraft carriers are impressive. What is it that Henry Kissinger said in the 20th century? He said that an aircraft carrier is 100,000 tons of diplomacy equivalent, right? But not the case today. Today, the real danger ship in any navy is the submarine. And India just has, I don't know how many, 15 or 16 submarines in total. We need 50 more, at least 20 more, right? And aircraft carriers are big, enticing targets. I mean, they are great for projecting power, and it's great for intimidating weaker countries. But in a hot war between two nations that are reasonably well matched, aircraft carriers are great targets. And destroying one aircraft carrier is such a gigantic morale booster for the one who destroys it. It's a disaster for the nation that loses the aircraft carrier, because it's $5-6 billion of equipment plus all the aircraft on top of it, all of that destroyed. So I think, so there is a principle in naval warfare which is called distributed lethality. So India's area of interest is the Sea of Saurashtra, the Sea of Kalinga, and the overall Indian Ocean region. Okay, it's a gigantic piece of maritime real estate. And if India wants to dominate this, India needs to have distributed lethality, which means you need to have a large number of assets distributed over a large area. So wherever a foreign ship goes, they should see an Indian presence. But if you have concentrated lethality in the form of 2 or 3 aircraft carriers, it's hardly visible at all. You can project power to the planes and all that, to the aircraft, to the fighter planes. But patrolling is ownership. And the more assets you have for patrolling, the more of the Indian Ocean you actually own, right? So what you actually should have is a large number of smaller, cheaper, but lethal assets, like destroyers, like frigates, even missile boats, definitely submarine, large number of different kinds of deadly assets dispersed and distributed over a large area. That's what you want. That's what makes sense. But okay, we're going for 6 aircraft carriers. I mean, it's still just been announced. It doesn't mean it's going to happen next couple of years. Maybe it may take 10, 15 years to it, maybe 20 years to get the six. But in the meanwhile, you need to ensure that India's distributed lethality capabilities increase and so on. So overall, I think it's not a great idea. I mean, if the budget is there, that you can have 30 more submarines and a whole number of other assets plus four more aircraft carriers, absolutely go for it. But if in the process of getting those four extra aircraft carriers, you're cutting down on the number of submarines and destroyers and other ships you could have built, then that's a problem. That's how I see it. I am not a I mean, aircraft carriers are impressive for sure. If you're the captain of an aircraft carrier, my god, you're the top dog in the navy, right? So everybody would want to have that. And if you are the chief of naval staff and you have six aircraft carriers at your disposal, my god, what prestige. But hey, the navy, the military doesn't exist for someone's prestige. Its purpose is to deter the enemy and to serve the national interest and to project power. So the best way to project power is what we need to go for. I mean, if aircraft carriers do that, cost versus benefit, then do it all by all means. But I don't think it's that good of an idea. If India had a GDP of, let's say, right now India's GDP is what, $4 trillion. If India's GDP was, let's say $15 trillion, by all means have 10 aircraft carriers, sure, then it's fine. But right now we have limited resources, so we need to allocate those resources the best way possible. So that's how I see it. I know lots of people disagree with me, military experts. Well, it's all right. That's all right. We can all have our own points of view. Nutan Roshan says, is Tengri, Mongolian god, and Rudra the same? Both have Trishul, the trident. No, different gods. See, we have in India Hinduism. In Mongolia, we have Tengriism. Okay, whenever the English gave a name to a religion which was not Christianity, they put an ism at the end. So Mongolia is this large country over here. So let's say you are in Manipur. Okay, Manipur. You just go straight north. Go straight north, straight north, straight north, and you will reach Mongolia. So the distance from Arunachal Pradesh to Mongolia is, in a straight line, about 1900 kilometers. Pretty long distance, but not that long. And overall, historically, Mongolia was twice the size it is today. Half of Mongolia has been swallowed up illegally by China. Now, what is Tengrism? So you will have lots of people claiming that Tengrism is a monotheistic religion. Monotheistic religion because it is named after the god Tengri. That is such a bad lie. Tengrism is a polytheistic religion. There is the sky father Tengri, there is the earth mother Umai, and there are a whole lot of other gods and goddesses and spirits and all that. There are elements of ancestor worship, there are elements of nature worship, there is river worship, there is mountain worship, there is tree worship, there is spirit worship, and you have the main gods like Tengri, Umai, and whatever other gods they have. It's a purely polytheistic religion. And today you will see lots of Indian elements in Mongolia. So let's go to Google, our friend Google, and try to do a search for Tengrism. Let's do that. Let me share my screen and let's search for Tengrism. Tengri. And if you see the imagery, you will see lots of shamanistic practices. You will see swastikas, of course. You will see swastikas, and you will see tridents. Let us see. Do we have tridents somewhere? You will see tridents in Mongolia for sure. You have various kinds of images. Okay, let us search for Tengrism trident. So yes, you have Shri Chinggis Khan with his trident. You have the trident in all at the top. Okay, they're saying it's Japanese, but it's not. It looks Mongolian to me. And so on. And obviously people will draw parallels with Hinduism because we also have the trident. This is the mausoleum of Shri Chinggis Khan, the great warrior for peace. And you have a trident there. And if you look at the Mongolian symbol, the national symbol of Mongolia, Soyombo, Soyambhu. Okay, Soyambhu. This is the Soyombo symbol or the Swayambhu symbol, which you will see all across Mongolia. And it comes from the Swayambhu script, which was created by a Mongolian Buddhist monk, and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of Indian imagery in Mongolia, Indian symbolism, because of the Tibetan connection, which is a whole historical story over there. So these are two separate polytheistic traditions. The Indian Hindu polytheistic tradition, Hindu, Buddhist, what Jain, Sikh, all of that, that is all under one single umbrella, which is the Indian religious paths. And you have the Mongolian Tengri tradition, which was separate. So Tengri and Rudra or Tengri and Shiva are not the same, even though they have very similar characteristics from certain perspectives, but they are not quite the same. Okay, they do both have the trident. And Mongolia later became a Buddhist nation, and not entirely Buddhist. I mean, if you look at people of Mongolia today, most of them will say that they're Buddhist, but they will also worship Tengri. They will also have elements of Tengrism in their Buddhist traditions. So wherever Indian religions go, they intermingle and syncretize with the local traditions wherever you go historically. If you go to Japan, okay, the Japanese version of what they call Buddhism has all the Indian gods and goddesses, and it was very beautifully syncretized with Shinto, which is the indigenous uh, culture or tradition, religious tradition of Japan. And Shinto has more in common with Hinduism than with Buddhism, by the way. So in Japan, Hinduism, Buddhism syncretized beautifully with Shinto. In Mongolia, Buddhism syncretizes beautifully with the Tengri traditions. If you go to the Philippines today, Philippines is a Christian country. Well, the Spanish destroyed Hinduism in the Philippines. The Philippines used to have rajas. They used to have kings, Hindu kings, and the whole nation, the whole population was essentially Hindu, and they practiced Hinduism, but it was once again syncretized with the indigenous belief system of the Philippines. The same thing happened all across Southeast Asia and so on, right? So that's how it was. So yeah, that's to make a long story short. Tengrism and Hinduism are different, and Tengri and Rudra are not the same, even though they have a lot of common and similar characteristics. Okay. What else? Okay, Aniket Singh says, who's gonna win the 2024 election? What if the Congress wins? Please share your perspective. Uh, I think Mr. Modi is gonna win, which means the BJP is gonna win. I think so, and I certainly hope so. I make no secret of it. I am pro Modi. I'm pro BJP for the simple reason that they have done so much to to transform India over the past 10 years. The results are visible. Some people disagree. Some people think he's a dictator. Some people claim he's a dictator. I don't care. And if he is really a dictator, then why are the people who are claiming that he's a dictator not in jail? Huh? So that's a different matter. I think the BJP is going to win this election. I think Mr. Modi is going to win. If they do not win, then it's disaster for India. That's my perspective. Very short, very straightforward. Okay. Tejas, hello. Tejas says, why didn't the later Marathas destroy the Mughal Sultanate in Delhi? Why make them vassals when they could have ruled over the whole of India? Why not completely abolish them? That is a question that's a question to which I still don't have an answer. I haven't studied Maratha history in that much detail, especially that part in which the 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 Maratha Empire expands almost all over India, takes over northern India, goes all the way to southern Afghanistan, uh, and yet they allow the so-called Mughal Sultan to rule Delhi, just one little bit of India. Why? I'm not really sure why. You're right. They should have abolished the Sultanate, and destroyed the Sultanate because they were clearly an illegitimate foreign occupying force. So I don't know. There must have been some political calculations behind this to make them a vassal and so on. I still haven't studied that part in sufficient detail to be able to give you a proper answer. But yes, it is a question that has perplexed me as well. Why not simply wipe it out? I mean, what legitimacy did these Turks have in India? Maybe there must be some reason. Maybe I should probably study that part of history and see why it was so. Okay, okay. Ayushman Mathpati says, I would love to be big and strong, maybe 7 feet tall and 120 kilos, but very negative environment here, and people say it's impossible for Indians. Well, the Great Khali is 7 feet tall and maybe 130 kilos. I don't know. Look, 7 feet tall, being 7 feet tall is extraordinarily rare and unusual anywhere in the world. Even in like you typically the nations with the tallest populations. I think the Netherlands, the average height is 6 feet, I think, in the Netherlands, or 6'1". In Germany, the average height of males is 6 feet. So even in these nations with small, reasonably small populations, somebody being 7 feet tall is quite unusual. So, um, and I'll tell you what, being 7 feet tall may look very impressive, but it is extremely problematic. You face a lot of problems and constraints when you're that tall. You don't fit through doors, you don't fit in aircraft seats, you don't fit in your car, you don't fit in a regular sized bed or a sofa. There are all kinds of problems, and with that height your spine will have increased stress and all that. You may have medical issues unless you're super fit and you take a lot of time to build up your muscle mass and all that. And having a weight of 120 kilos, I don't think that's sustainable over a long period of time. Okay, so I know it looks impressive, and yeah, I'm superior, I'm better. That's the feeling you'll get if you're like that, but I don't think it's really desirable. I'm reasonably tall, but I've never wished that I was 7 feet tall. I never did that. So, but let's say you want to be 7 feet tall. So, is it possible? I don't know what negative environment you are experiencing because I'm not familiar with your circumstances. But let's say you want to grow to the fullest extent of your genetic potential. Well, then, assuming you are a teenager, let's say you're 15 or let's say you're 14, and you want to reach your genetic potential, whatever height is encoded, maximum height is encoded in your genes. Well, then you should eat a very clean diet, have a very clean lifestyle, exercise regularly, go to the gym or go to the track and field track and work out, run every day, be very physically active, eat very good food, drink plenty of fluids and water, not fluids, not Coke or whatever else, and have your 8 to 10 hours of sleep. If you do all that, you will most likely reach your genetic potential. But everybody has a certain limit, extent to which they can grow in height. So that all depends on your genetics. Some people may have it may be 6'5", for some people it may be possibly 7 feet tall. For some people it may be 5'10" or 5'6". Who knows? So the genetic cards that you've been dealt were dealt by the gods. There's nothing you can do about it. All you can do is do your best to reach your genetic potential. There's no such thing as it's impossible for Indians. You know, in the 20th century, I believe the average height for the Chinese people was males was 5'3", 5'4" or something. Chinese were very short. Today, the average Chinese male is 5'7", I think, or 5'8". I'm not sure it's 5'8", 5'7". The Japanese males were very short in the 20th century. Same thing like the Chinese, 5'3", 5'4". Today, I think the average height of Japanese men is 5'8". So it all depends on your nutrition and lifestyle. India has gone through a couple of centuries, 2.5 centuries of British induced famines. Okay. So the lifestyle has been affected by that, and your diet has been affected by that. Starvation food is now part of your traditional food, traditional diet. You don't realize that for 2 centuries you were forced to eat such things, your ancestors. And then because of that, because they were eating this for 2.5 centuries, it became your tradition. But before the British occupation of India, your ancestors of that time would have had a very different diet. which you don't realize because nobody has taught you that. Your history teachers won't tell you this. So you have to eat the right kind of diet. And I don't think there's anything like Indians cannot be tall or any such thing. You have lots of tall Indians as well. So anyway, that is how I see it. Karan Nalavat is back. Hello, sir. In spite of having so much talent, why has India not won any Nobel Prize or international prize in natural sciences or in mathematics? Uh, will you make any course in physics? Hmm. Okay, couple of questions here. Okay, so when it comes to mathematics, you don't have Nobel Prizes, you have the Fields Medal, which is an even tougher thing because it's given out once in 4 years, I believe, and you have to be less than 40 years old to get a Fields Medal. Manjul Bhargav has won the Fields Medal, and was there any other Indian? I'm not sure. I can remember Manjul Bhargav, who is obviously, I think, Indian American or whatever. So that that tells you a story. Why has why have Indians not won a Nobel Prize in the natural sciences in recent times? Because of the crappy Indian education system. Garbage, junk, trash. The Indian education system is garbage. The Indian academic system is mediocre at best. Don't get me started on that. I mean, show me one Indian academic in pick any university and show me one Indian academic who's doing world class work or one academic who is capable of doing world class research. The Indian education system excels at identifying and destroying talent and promoting mediocrity. In the Indian academic system, the system of promotions and all that, that also promotes mediocrity and suppresses and marginalizes talent. You need to be good at all the non-academic work. You need to be good at politics and blah 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 to advance to high ranking position in any physics department or whatever department, chemistry department. You know, Uh, when you go back to the beginning of the 20th century, Niels Bohr was the head of department in the Bohr Institute before he was 30 years old. All the major advances in quantum physics and later quantum mechanics were done by young men. Heisenberg was in his early 20s when he came up with matrix mechanics and the uncertainty principle. Uh, who else? Pauli was a young man. Pauli did a tremendous amount of work, yes, didn't he? Einstein was in his mid 20s when he came up with those 5 brilliant papers in the year 1905. So many others I can think of. The only old guy out there was Planck, 1900, when he derived the equation and came up with the quantum, with quantization. And you had Schrodinger, who was in his 40s when he came up with wave mechanics, the Schrodinger equation. My point is, you need to promote young, talented people. But if you are in your 20s today, you are simply trying to find your place in the academic system, and you have another 20 years to climb before you can become a assistant professor or full professor or whatever. It's horrible. It's a daily grind and so on. So the system is so bad. The system is so bad, first of all, that there's no chance of any great research happening in India. I mean, if you look at the IITs, they have sociology departments and humanities departments and God knows what. So much of the funding is going into that stuff. Anyway, IITs are about technology, not about pure sciences, natural sciences. But there's hardly anything happening. If there are some good scientists hidden away somewhere, I'm sure there are, but I don't think the environment is conducive for them to do any good research, proper research. Because, when you are a scientist, a researcher in the natural sciences, you need to spend a lot of time thinking. A physicist may be staring out of his or her window for 6 hours, and you may wonder, what the hell is this person doing? We are paying them to work. Excuse me, they are working. Staring out of the window for 6 hours doing nothing is actually working. There's thought going on here. So that's a very different world, and they need that space and they need that time. But that you won't find in India. The environment isn't right in India for doing research. That's one. And secondly, there is bias against Indians. That is also there. But that's a whole different problem. So I'll not blame others. I'll say that the Indian academic system is garbage. It is rotten to the core. Okay? Corrupt and politicized. That's why. Indians are super talented. You transform the education system, and you make it meritocratic and clean. I promise you, the research will just take off in India in directions you can't even imagine. the the next golden age of physics could come from India if you have the right environment in the Indian academic system, in the Indian university system. Have you gone to a Indian university? It's run by non-academic staff, those clerks and peons and those people, the administrators. And in every department, the head clerk has more power than the head of department. And if you meet the head of department, most of these heads of department are like glorified clerks. They don't do any research. They don't do any science. They just administer. And that's the glorified position. I want to be the head of department, so I have the most power and I can tell everybody what to do, and I have the funding and budget in my hands and so on. What about your research? What about your work? Who cares? So yeah, that's why. Sorry for the long answer, but you asked me this question and you'll set me off. Okay. Now, what else? Aha. McLovin says, can you tell us about the Iran port deal and the threat of US sanctions? Yes. So once again, let's go to the map. Where's the map? Where's the map? Here's the map. Where's the map? So we're talking about the Iran port deal. So I'm sure we are familiar with the map of India. So now let's go westwards. The Sea of Saurashtra, the Gulf of Oman, the Persian Gulf. Now, there is this temporary nation, artificial nation between India and Persia, which is Pakistan. And you go to the Makran coast in Balochistan, you have the port of Gwadar in Pakistan. Okay? And if you go westwards further, there is another big port, which is Chabahar in Persia, in Iran. So this port has been handed over essentially to India for the next 10 years. That's a deal that India and Iran have just signed. This is the port that we are talking about. These are satellite images. Okay? Chabahar port. This is the one. So India will essentially operate this port for the next 10 years. And what that does is that it allows India to bypass Pakistan and access Central Asia through Iran. And not just Central Asia. So it will bolster the north-south transport corridor, which will connect India to Central Asia and to Russia. It will also allow India to access Afghanistan bypassing Pakistan. So India just has to send ships to Chabahar in order to send materials and goods and whatever else into Afghanistan, as well as to Central Asia and even to Russia, and to get consignments from these places as well. So no need to go through Pakistan to reach Afghanistan and Central Asia. Now it will be done through Chabahar. So that's great for India. That's great for Iran. That's also great for Central Asia, all the countries in the region. And the Americans are unhappy because the Americans don't like Iran. You know what they did recently, right? The entire Israel-Iran thing, the tensions are still high. Iran's embassy, Iran's consulate in Damascus was targeted by the Israelis. Iran hit back, Israel hit back, and so on and so forth. And the Americans, a few years ago, they assassinated the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani in Iraq and all. So long history between the US and Iran. And the Americans have imposed all kinds of sanctions on Iran, just like they've done on Russia. And India doing this agreement with Iran is something the Americans are very unhappy about. And they've publicly threatened that they may sanction India. Now, imagine the US sanctioning India. That is not the act of a friendly nation, that is an overtly hostile act. Imposing sanctions, the only authority, the only legitimate authority that has the right to impose sanctions anywhere in the world is the United Nations. When the US does this, it's kind of like an act of war. Okay? The US recently imposed sanctions on China, more sanctions. Check out Biden's tweet. I'll not put it up over here because it's a different matter. So that's the thing. So, like I said, once again, let's go back to the map. And like I said before, let me reiterate this. India has limited utility for the US. The only utility that the US sees in India is as a counterweight to China, but they have propped up Pakistan as a counterweight to India as well, to keep India off balance at any given point in time. If they need to, they can activate Pakistan, the terrorist nation which they aided and abetted for decades. Beyond that utility, the Americans see India as a long term adversary and competitor because India's economy is growing. Because India has to grow its economy to have reasonable living standards in India and to reach its real potential. Historically, the past 2000 years, most of the past 2000 years, India was the world's largest economy. I am not making this claim, it is Angus Madison's research that has proven this. So, India eventually will regain its historical position. It's a natural process. And the Americans would not like this to happen because it will displace them. As look, put yourselves in the shoes of the United States for a moment. The US is the world's largest economy, the most powerful nation. It has more than 800 military bases outside its territory, all spread all across the world. It is the only superpower, tremendous power projection, and any self-respecting superpower will make sure that no competitor is allowed to emerge. They already made a big mistake with China, and now they are trying to rectify that mistake. So the situation is such that if India's economy keeps growing, let's say 6, 7, 8% per year for the next 20 years, even the next 10 years, then by 2035, India is gonna start showing signs and symptoms of being the next China. Okay? Especially if you have a good leadership, the kind of leader we have right now. So that's what worries the US. And that's why they're going to make things difficult for India. They're going to do whatever it takes, increasingly, over the next few years, to hamper India's growth and to hurt India's national interests. And they will resort to bullying tactics, arm twisting tactics. They may impose sanctions at some point in time, and so on. So we are beginning to see all this, and we also already see the media barrage against India, the vilification of India, and characterizing India as an authoritarian nation, as Modi as a dictator, and saying that India's democracy has been backsliding and minorities are under threat in India, and blah 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 blah. Hey, what about the U.S. minorities, the Native Americans? What happened to them? So it's all hypocrisy, but they have earned the right to be hypocritical by being so powerful. So yeah, so the future of India-US relations isn't gonna be very good the next 10 years. After that, we don't know. Okay, we can talk about a 10-year horizon at best, but beyond that, I'll not talk about it. There you have it. Okay, schools are a disease. Ask Abhijit. How to ignore toxic souls. Like you're so smooth in ignoring questions you don't want, supposedly waste your time. Look, okay, I see when it comes to taking questions, I mean, I have several hundred, maybe several, maybe more than 1,000 questions a year on my timeline. I obviously cannot take all of them, right? So I'm going to have to quickly scroll through the questions and pick whatever catches my eye out of all the questions here, and a question that is relevant and hopefully gives you some kind of value. So the answer to that question should give you some kind of value. So I pick questions in real time. You're all asking me questions right now. I pick questions real time, just with those one or two criteria in mind. That it should be an interesting question and the answer should give you some actual value. That's how I do it. So I don't ignore questions. I just pick and choose questions that would hopefully give you the best value. Um, Now, how to ignore toxic souls? Well, that's a good question. How do you ignore toxic people? In some cases, you can't. Let's say you are a student in a school, in a class, and you have, let's say, the typical Indian classroom, let's say 50 students, boys and girls, let's say half half. Now, you are stuck in that class for 1 year at least. Let's say you're in the eighth standard, you're going to be with them until the 10th standard. So 3 years with them. What can you do about it? You're going to be stuck with them. So you can't really ignore them as such, but you can minimize your interactions with any of those who are toxic. You can do that. That's one thing. If you have, if you are, let's say, an employee in an office, in a workplace, in a company, then once again you're stuck with all those people, your co-workers and your bosses. Sometimes you have toxic bosses, sometimes you have toxic co-workers. What can you do about it? You either move to another department or a different company, or you just put up with it and you just carry on and don't pay too much heed to such people. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Sometimes you have to interact one on one, and then you have to find ways of dealing with the toxicity. So every situation is different, all circumstances are unique in some ways, but what you have to remember is that you owe them nothing, and you don't need to live up to their expectations. You don't need to take what they say seriously. When you are in close proximity with somebody, okay, let's say you have a toxic boss, so there's nothing you can do about it. And some bosses are like that. They're gonna just keep on putting you down and keep on saying that you're not performing well, or you have this problem or that problem, this defect, that defect, and you're gonna have it daily. The best thing you can do is, if you are stuck there for some time, you don't have any other job offers for at least the next, let's say, 6 months or 3 months, then you cannot let that affect you. Don't start believing what they are saying, and try and find ways of moving on. So eventually, or you could fight back, not physically, but you could also lash out at them and be equally toxic. uh, Say it's entirely up to you what methodology you use for self defense or going on the offense. My main thing is that I prefer not to be in contact with toxic people. If there are toxic people in your vicinity, cut them out. In case you can't cut them out, limit the exposure to those people, and so on. So we all look. I've lived a long life. Obviously, I've come in contact with all kinds of toxic people in during my education, in school, college, university. I'm sure teachers, classmates, in during my professional career as well. Of course, you have that. See, so you got to find ways to deal with it. The main thing you have to remember is that don't allow people's criticisms and whatever affect you personally. Never believe that nonsense. All right, that's what I'll say. Red says, what happened to the Scythians in Central Asia? Why did they disappear from Central Asia? And if they haven't disappeared, who are their modern day descendants in Central Asia? Let's go to the map. It's a good question. Yes. This is so Central Asia essentially is the steppe region from eastern Ukraine all the way through through the Caucasus region, northern Caucasus region, and the stans: Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and so on, and present day Xinjiang, so-called East Turkestan, the western part of the present day nation of China. All of that is Central Asia. And 2,500 years ago, that this entire large region was called Scythia. It was inhabited by the Scythian people. So we Indians and our Iranian friends also called them the Shakas. So it was called Shakistan, this entire region, Shakistan, Scythians. And they are classified as an Iranian people. They're actually an Indo-Iranian people. And 2,000 years ago, roughly, they entered India, invaded India. They were fleeing from the Kushans, and the Kushans were fleeing from the Huns. Very funny story. Okay. So the Scythians entered India from the northwest. They subjugated over time the Indo-Greek kingdoms, and they conquered various parts of India, northern and western India. There were the northern Kshatraps and the western Kshatraps, Mahakshatrapas. They were all Scythian origin people. The northern Kshatraps were obviously naturally located, and their kingdoms were in northern India. The western Satraps, the Mahakshatrapas, their kingdoms were in Gujarat, the Gujarat region, which included Sindh also in those times. They controlled the great ports of Gujarat, which connected India all the way to Mesopotamia and Egypt, and all the way to Greece and Rome. So these Scythians, a large number of them, migrated to India, invaded India, conquered parts of India, ruled India for some time, and settled down in India and assimilated into the Indian population. So their descendants are all over India today, all over India, all over Pakistan, all over Afghanistan, the descendants of those Scythians. So that's one answer to your question. Lots of Indians have some Scythian ancestry, maybe 5%, 10%, maybe 30%. We don't know. They all look the same. So the thing is, when the Scythians came into India and mixed with the Indian population, there was no cultural or religious friction. Why is that? because they were the same culture. The Scythians were sun worshippers, they were polytheists, and their language was also quite similar to Indian language. So they were able to assimilate into the Indian population very harmoniously. So that is the Scythians and India. What about the remaining Scythians? Well, those remaining Scythians, some of them, their descendants, still live in the Caucasus region. Today, the religion is Islam. In the Dagestan region and the Chechnya region, the language is called Iran, I think, in this region. The Georgians, Armenians, Azeris are not Scythians, descendants of Scythians, but the people of Chechnya, etc., the Caucasus region, many of them are. And when it comes to the Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, or Tajikistan region, well, and even the Uyghurs, etc., these people are descended from Turkic males and Scythian females. Let's just put it that way. Okay? Because of the Turkic conquest of this region. So most vestiges of Scythian culture and language were wiped out. Everything was replaced by the Turkic language and Turkic customs. The only thing that remains is 50% or so Scythian genetics in the region. An entire culture wiped out by the Turks. Okay. What's next? Will Vivek Ramaswamy become VP under Trump? Well, I don't know what Trump is thinking and what he will decide. There's talk that he will make what's her name, Tulsi Gabbard, his VP. I mean, that's a possibility that is being considered seriously. So I don't know who he will choose in the end. He will have his own calculations. He is very secretive from that perspective. He doesn't, let people know what he is thinking, as any good leader would. Keep things, secretive. So it is likely that Vivek, if Trump wins, will get some high-ranking position in the Trump cabinet in some form or the other. It's likely, but VP, I'm not sure. Maybe VP is too much of a leap for somebody who has no actual political experience or governance experience. So maybe he will get some good position in the Trump cabinet, something in which you can really fight the media or whatever, because Vivek is very combative and really good at answering questions and arguing logically, constructively. So that's what I think. I'm not sure if he will get the VP position, the coveted VP position. Okay. Technical Ansh says, should a student aim for mastering a skill after the 12th standard or target top colleges? As we are the youngest country and still engineering and doctor trend is rising. After the 12th standard, look, it depends on who you are and what your aims and objectives are. If you want to, let's say, join a certain profession, then you would need to master those skills. Let's say some people want to become chartered accountants because there's a lot of money to be made in that. I'm not sure it's a very interesting field, but there's a lot of money to be made, I hear, because everybody needs an accountant. So let's say you want to be a CA, chartered accountant. Well, you will need to master those skills. Well, it's essentially basic arithmetic, but I'm sure there is, accounting and I don't know, whatever is there in CA skills. So you would need to master that. Let's say you want to become a rocket scientist. You want to join ISRO or you want to start your own company. Well, you would need to learn aerodynamics and rocket science, propulsion, and all those things, right? So I think it depends on what your objective is. If you don't have an objective, then you will not know what to do. But if you have a clear vision of where you want to be by the time you're 25 or by the time you're 30, then you can plan step by step. So when you're doing your 12th, you're typically 17 years old, right? 17, 18, what is it? 17, I think. But let's say 18. Let's say it's 18. You do your 12th exam when you're 18. And then you have the question of whether you go to a college and get a degree, bachelor's degree, and then go to university and get a master's degree or do an MBA, blah, blah, blah. All of that will depend on what you want to achieve. So you need to have a clear target for where you want to be in life, career wise, when you're 25 and also when you're 30. You need to have a very clear vision of that. And then you break it down backwards. Okay, see, let's say I am at this position when I'm 30. So what would I have done to reach there? And then you work backwards. And that's how I do it. So it depends entirely on what you want to achieve and what objectives and vision you have for your life. In case it is a specific career, then you would need to acquire those skills. You know. So for that, and yeah, colleges. Do you go to a top college? Do you go to a medium college? Do you go to a regular? I don't know, not a top college. I think if you want to go into the job market, you will need to go to as top a college as possible because it looks great on a resume. And when you are just starting out, they look at your academic record, track record. So if you are always stood first and you went to the most brilliant college that you can imagine, then you will get the job in a top company. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, then it doesn't matter. If you want to go into business, you want to start your own business, you want to be an entrepreneur, then I would say that acquire the skills for entrepreneurship and business after the 12th. Forget about degrees. But then you will not get good jobs. So you better be good at business and so on. So it depends entirely on what you want to achieve. So know what you want to do. Okay. All right. What's next? What's next? Um Shadow says, what to do to get back our areas from China, Pakistan? Why not use blockchain in election voting? I think it will be pretty safe. And no one can doubt as anyone can see the vote casted. Okay, when it comes to areas that we need to take back from China, Pakistan, etc., look, these processes take time. If you look at the maps of the world and the nations, decade upon decade over the past 200 300 years, you will see maps constantly changing. Maps change all the time, national boundaries change all the time. It depends on which nation is more powerful, which nation is less powerful. Power is like pressure. The more powerful you are, the more outward pressure you exert, and that's how maps change, borders change. The more powerful you are, the more outward pressure you exert, and the map will go outwards. The lines of the map will go outwards, and you will get more territory. That's how it goes. So, what should we do to do that? Become more powerful. India has to become more powerful, which means the economy needs to keep growing for the next 20 years. As the economy grows, the military power grows, becomes more and more massive, and eventually you will get your territories back, most likely without having to fire a single shot. So that's what India needs to do. Blockchain in election voting. I look, no matter what you do, people will question. People will have questions. People will raise questions, doubting the voting mechanism, doubting EVMs. If you don't have EVMs, if you cast paper ballots, and see the kind of rigging you see in the United States. Do you remember the 2020 elections that Trump lost? Do you have any idea of the election uh, abnormalities, malpractices, and whatever else happened? Lots of votes were counted twice in some districts. Some votes were not counted at all because they were counting these paper ballots manually. So if you do manual ballots, paper ballots, there are lots of problems. People can just rig the election by capturing booths and stamping entire lots of ballots. If you have electronic voting, then some people will raise other questions. There is no perfect system. So I have not thought about blockchain in elections and voting. Maybe it's a good idea, but I haven't really thought about that or looked into that matter yet. But I think every technology can be hacked. There is no perfect uh, method anywhere. Okay, what's next? Um, Harsh says India has extended $50 million support to the Maldives despite recent frictions. Also, recent elections show that people support Mr. Muizu, showing poor people to people relations. Thoughts about this? The Maldives. Do we know what the Maldives are, my dear friends? Let's go to the map. Where's the map? Where's the map? Here's the map. So there is something called the Lakshadweep Chagos Ridge. and the Maldives are part of that. So the Chagos region is here, the Lakshadweep Islands are over here, okay, and down south you have the Maldives. So the Maldives are this weird nation that oscillates, vacillates from pro India to pro China, pro India, pro China, pro India, pro China. So you have a pro India government for a while, then that government is overthrown, and the pro China government comes to power. Then that stays in power for a while, for a few years. Then you have a pro India government that comes back. And then you have a pro China government again. So right now we have Mr. Muizu, who is the leader of the Maldives. He is virulently anti India and pro China. And his party got a sweeping majority in the elections that happened recently, which means the people are okay with it. The people agree with this anti-India sentiment. India out. Okay. Now the deal is this: the Maldives are in a strategically important location, and we don't want China to make too much headway there. So we are stuck with the situation. We, as in India, we are stuck for at least 5 years with an anti-India dispensation in the Maldives. Now, what do we do about that? If we completely cut off relations with them, China will get a free march into the Maldives. They already, building infrastructure and all that in the Maldives, the Chinese. And if we completely cut off relations, then the Chinese will get an even stronger presence in the Maldives. So we are kind of stuck between two bad choices, stuck between a brick and a rock and a hard place, kind of. It's not a nation that can really harm India, but we don't want a significant Chinese presence in our backyard. So we're going to have to swallow this pain for some time and cooperate to whatever extent is possible with the Maldives. Give them some money. Do you know what is $50 million from a geopolitical perspective? It's a few grains of sugar. Okay, let me just put that in perspective. It's a couple of peanuts. It's not a whole lot of money. $50 million. So yeah, you give that support to them. You keep the relationship going in some manner. And what you then do is that you ensure that the next time there's an election and so on, the right kind of government comes to power. And you do that in a proper manner, not by interfering in their electoral process like the Americans would do, or doing a coup, but you do it properly in a nice manner. So that's what I would say. It's a process. It's a long-term process, and we're gonna have to deal with 5 years of this nonsense. This guy is so annoying. Muizu. Why do I keep saying Pazuzu? Reminds me of The Exorcist, his movie. Okay, what next? Technical Ansh says, are you into spirituality? Have you ever experienced oneness? Spirituality. Well, look, I'm not an atheist. I do follow my ancestral traditions, Hindu traditions, for sure. So it's kind of complicated. I don't know what spirituality is. I do respect our civilizational traditions. I will visit temples and pay my respects to the gods. I do that, and I'm very happy to do that. So if that is spirituality, I'm into spirituality. I don't know what else spirituality means. Some people would say that I am spiritual but not religious, which means that I will meditate and do some mantra japping, but I will not go and visit a temple and not pray to any god. I don't know what exactly it means. So I'm not into that sort of pseudo spirituality or whatever it is. I am a Hindu, and I'm happy to be a Hindu, proud to be a Hindu, and I do pay my respects to the gods of my ancestors, of our ancestors, whenever I can, and that's about it. Okay. Kshitij Negi says, what are your views on people calling Modi ji a dictator? It's very simple. Look, if you can call the leader of a country a dictator and nothing happens to, and nothing will happen to you, it means that guy is not a dictator. Simple test. Go to China, go on their social media and call Xi Jinping a dictator. Say that Xi Jinping is a dictator. What's going to happen to you? Within half an hour, the cops will arrive and they'll teach you a lesson you will never forget. First of all, you'll be behind bars for a few years, and that's not all that will happen to you. That is dictatorship. Go to North Korea. Okay, go to North Korea, Pyongyang, and stand in the big square over there and say that Kim Jong Un is a dictator. Down with Kim Jong Un. Kim Jong Un. What's going to happen to you? You'll never come out of Korea alive. North Korea alive. That is a dictatorship. Over here, anybody can say whatever they want to Mr. Modi, and they know nothing's going to happen to them. But there are certain states in India where you can't say a word against the ruling dispensation there. Okay, allegedly. I'm not naming anybody, okay, or any state. But that's what you have. So is that dictatorship? Is Mr. Modi a dictator? Really? So the people who are doing that serve a certain agenda. They have certain paymasters, I imagine. I don't know. But I imagine they are being paid to make such statements and create such propaganda. And well, I would say it's deeply unfortunate that some people will sell their country at the altar of foreign money. So I say, okay. Tanishq Arya says, how to start the journey of being a polymath? You gotta read a lot and study a lot. I mean, if you think of polymaths, you can think of Leonardo da Vinci. He was a polymath. He was a great artist. He was also interested in anatomy. He did dissections furtively at night. He was also into engineering and science and whatnot. So that's a polymath. So to be a polymath, you need to have expertise in multiple domains, in multiple fields. You need to be great at let's say arts. So you need to be great at drawing and painting. Let's say one example. You need to be great at mathematics. You need to be great at physics. You need to be great at engineering. So multiple disciplines that are not connected to each other, and you are an authority or an expert in like 3 or 4 of these. That's what you mean by being a polymath. That's a very difficult thing. It's not for most people. I would say, I don't know, 1 out of 100,000, 1 out of a million would be a polymath, would be capable of being a polymath. So I don't think it's something you need to aspire for. What you need to aspire for is to be an expert in one domain or one field and be really good at that. So start with that. Whatever it is that you think you are really well suited to do, try and gain expertise in that. Then you will find that will take time. So once you do that, then you may feel that was enough. Once you reach the level of an expert in that. So if you really want to be a polymath, you have to spend all of your time reading and studying multiple things in multiple disciplines. And it's going to take you at least a decade or 2 to actually become a polymath. So I'm not sure if it is something you should even try to do, Madhya, if that's what you want. It's going to take you a lot of time and effort, but all the best. Okay. Okay, what else do we have? I already spoke about I already covered this some time ago. Dr. Jaishankar, when are we going to see Jaishankar ji on your podcast? Well, please ask Dr. Jaishankar. He can always come anytime. My podcast is open for him. Let's see, whenever. Okay. Divyansh Dauber says, history of Roar caste in Haryana. I'm really sorry. I do not have much knowledge about this matter, about the history of the Roar people, Haryana. I'm sorry. This is something I don't know about. Okay, Leo says, why don't you make videos in Hindi? I'm more comfortable with English. Mental colonization. You see? I spent my whole life, my entire education system was in the English medium. And everything I've studied and read in my life has been in English. I'm better in English. I'm better at a foreign language than in Hindi, which is actually something that is not something to be proud of. But that's where I am. Okay, so that's why I don't make videos in Hindi. I do appear on other channels in which I speak in Hindi, and you will see that after some time English comes out. And then I try to go back to Hindi, and then again I'll lapse into English. That's one reason. Secondly, the Hindi I have learned isn't the best Hindi. Okay, the Hindi that people typically speak in India is filled with foreign loan words, Arabic, Persian, and Turkish loan words. When you say kebab, that's a Turkish word. When you say jigger, liver, that's a Turkish word, Turkish. When you say tawa, that cooking instrument, that's a Turkish word. You may not be even aware of it. I don't like using foreign words. When you say waqt, it's either Persian or probably Arabic. We should use the word samai. So I fear, I'm worried that I'll lapse into using words that are not Indian in origin, and I dislike that intensely. So that's why I prefer not to speak in Hindi, because I don't want to pay my respects to the languages of our occupiers, foreign occupiers, by uttering words from those languages. I'm still okay with Persian because they're anyway closely related to us, the Persians, our cousins. But I'm not fond of the Turkish language because of what the Turks did to India. And Arabic is in no way connected to our cultural language. I have nothing against the Arabic people, wonderful people overall. Today's Arabs. So yeah, so I prefer not to speak in Hindi for these various reasons. Today's Hindi is not a pure language. The grammar is based on Sanskrit grammar via the Prakrits, which came later, and the vocabulary is mostly Sanskrit vocabulary, but lots of foreign loan words, Arabic, Turkish, and Persian. Not a big fan of these languages, so that's why. So for these reasons, I prefer not to speak in Hindi, unless I'm invited to some channel and they want to speak in Hindi, in which I'll make an effort, and hopefully not speak too much English, and hopefully speak reasonably Shuddha Hindi. Okay. Hey. Anvay Sharma, Led Zeppelin versus Pink Floyd. 1-1. No, maybe Led Zeppelin. The problem with Pink Floyd, Pink Floyd is probably the greatest rock band of all time. But the problem is that they are gloomy. You listen to them, you'll get into a gloomy mood. Pink Floyd. It's all about, all gloomy topics. One of their songs is called Brain Damage. One of their songs is called Eclipse. One of their albums is called A Momentary Lapse of Reason. One of their songs is called Comfortably Numb, and so on. It's all gloomy, dark topics. Brain damage, imagine that. The lunatics are on the grass. There's someone in my head, but it's not me. The music is incredible, but overall, it's not. It puts you in a gloomy mood. Led Zeppelin is all about enjoy life. There's also some amount of angst in Led Zeppelin's lyrics and songs. Obviously, when you have the blues, you're going to have some angst, but overall, it's a much more happy band. Four very distinctive artists, musicians: Page, Plant, Bonham, and Jones. So overall, I would say I would prefer Led Zeppelin. But if you were to ask me which are the top two rock bands, Western rock bands, in my opinion, it's number one Led Zeppelin, number two Pink Floyd. Okay, Nishant says Zaman is Persian, Waqt is Arabic. All right, got it, sir. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Okay. Akhil O'Neill says, tell me your most favorite movies, TV shows, and tell me the reason behind it. Look, you know what they say. I have seen so many movies, I'm a big movie fan, by the way, movie buff. These days I don't watch too many movies because there are no good movies anymore. But if I had the choice, I would watch two movies on the big screen every week, as long as they're showing good movies. But these days I hardly watch two movies a year on the big screen, but I have seen lots of movies, lots and lots of movies, all the classics. I've seen the Rashomon, I've seen the Ran, I've seen all the Kurosawa movies, I've seen all the Bud Spencer, Terence Hill movies, which you may not even be aware of. Some of the best entertainment of all time, especially if you're a kid. Bud Spencer, Terence Hill. I am for the hippopotamus. And Trinity. My name is Trinity, and so on and so forth. All the James Bond movies of the 80s and 90s, no longer the 2000s. Yuck. Yuck. I was a big fan of Daniel Craig, but first movie, Casino Royale, was great. After that, it's all gone downhill slowly. Uh, what kind of movie genres do I like? Science fiction. I love science fiction. Uh, Comedy. I love comedy. Mask. The Mask. It's a movie you can watch 100 times and not get bored. Um, can't remember all my favorite movies. It's like, I've had so many meals in my life. I can't remember them all, but they all made me who I am. Similarly, I've read uncountable books. I can't remember them all, but they made me who I am. Similarly, I've watched so many movies and TV shows. I can't remember them all, but they kind of contributed to who I am today in some way. TV shows, uh, Breaking Bad was good. House of Cards was good as long as that guy was there. Underwood, Frank Underwood. What else? What else? Game of Thrones was good for the first, I don't know, 5 seasons or something. They ruined the last 2 seasons, and I can't remember them all. Maybe I should make a separate video on that. My top 50 movies and top 50 TV shows or something like that. Science fiction, big fan. I used to watch Star Trek. I liked the first three Star Wars movies, the originals, and so on. So much. I can speak about this for an hour, but let me stop there. Okay. Ritik Power says, how can I change the world? You change the world by participating in activities. Everything you do has some effect on the environment. Quantum decoherence. Okay, I'll not go there. So the thing is this: don't be an observer, be a participant. That way, you'll be able to change the world in some way, big or small. Now, not everybody is meant to change the world in a massive way, but you can certainly do something and leave something behind of yours, right? So the point is, don't merely observe what's happening passively, be an active participant. And the more a person of substance you become over time, the more robust will be your participation and the more impactful will be your participation. Okay, so that's what it is. Invest in yourself, develop yourself into the best version of what you can be, and participate wholeheartedly in whatever it is that interests you, in whatever it is that you believe in, and try to make a change. That's how we change the world in some way or the other. Okay. McLovin again. Why doesn't the Indian government reduce taxes on air conditioners? Why don't they put ACs in public spaces, public places? I think they should reduce taxes on air conditioners for sure. I think the Indian summer is very hot in some places, in many parts of India, north, south, wherever. So I think air conditioners should be declared a basic human right in India, and I think they should reduce taxes drastically on air conditioners. I think that's a very good thought. You can't put air conditioners in public places because of the way physics works. Okay, so for example, it's like trying to refrigerate a city. You can't refrigerate or air condition a city because you need a boundary between the place, between the area or the amount of air that you're cooling and the external air into which you need to throw out the excess heat. But if you are trying to essentially refrigerate or air condition the entire atmosphere, that doesn't work. So air conditioning works in an enclosed area only. Okay, that's the fundamental principle. So that's why you can't put ACs in public places. I mean, unless you want to do it in a mall or something. Yeah, you can have air conditioned mall. I'm sure most malls in India are air conditioned, aren't they? Even airports are air conditioned. But apart from that, I mean, if you want to air air condition the town square, that won't happen. Yeah, right. Okay. Okay. What else? What else? What else? What else? Uh, let us see. What else do we have? Why doesn't India have any vassal states like the US has and Russia has? Is India too small to have vassal states? Mm, well, some people would say that Bhutan is a vassal state of India. But overall, yeah, India doesn't have any vassal states like the Americans have. The US has, well, the entire EU is its vassal and so on. Russia, it has the Central Asian nations that you could consider to be in some ways to be its vassals in some way, and so on. Belarus is another example. Some would claim that, some would say that Belarus is a vassal. India is not that powerful. Just as simple as that. Okay. India is still not powerful enough to have vassal states. So, for India to in the future hypothetically have vassal states, India would need to be, I would say, at least thrice as powerful as what it is today in terms of hard power. So it's a process. It will take time, and that's simply why it is not the case. Anvay Sharma says, "Do you know music theory and Metallica versus Megadeth?" Music theory, well, yeah, I have some fundamental basic understanding of scales and notes and note progressions and the solfege notation and whatnot, because I do play music occasionally, not so much anymore, but I used to be kind of a musician and I still can kind of play the guitar. So, and I have taken interest, I mean, more than a passing interest in music. I also play ragas, Indian ragas, and so on. So that's why I do understand some music theory. Metallica versus Megadeth. I am not a big fan of thrash metal or heavy metal. Metallica is not merely thrash metal or heavy metal. They have a little more quality. So I would go with Metallica. Nishant says, "What are your thoughts on the legends of vampires, Dracula, and demonic possession? I think I think that a disease like rabies played a huge role in the formation of these myths. I think the legend of vampires was may have its origins either in the Black Death that ravaged Europe in the Dark Ages, medieval ages of Europe, or maybe in a disease that they used to call consumption, which is actually tuberculosis. So when a person has tuberculosis and if they're not treated, they start wasting away, their skin becomes pale, they lose their the redness goes away from their cheeks, they become entirely pale and they cough up blood and so on. So that is very vampiric traits. And so maybe the vampire myths had their origins in consumption, which is tuberculosis, and maybe the Black Death, maybe rabies also, because if somebody has rabies, human beings, then they, first of all, they become hydrophobic, they can't drink water, they are unable to swallow that, they're fearful if you give them a glass of water to drink, and the traits, behaviors that rabies patients they exhibit and so on. So yeah, maybe these are the origins, the actual factual origins of these myths, but because we obviously know that there are no vampires, there's no demonic possession as far as we know. I hope there's not. Don't tell me. Yeah, there you have it. Um, Geopolitical Dubey says, "I want to learn Chinese. Please give me some suggestions." That's one language I have never attempted to learn, so I don't know what to say. What are the languages I have tried learning? Well, I know, well, non-Indian languages, I only know French. And that's something I didn't try learning. I just learned because I was a kid in a French-speaking country. So I just picked up French in a couple of months. Kids learn very fast. They learn without even noticing that they're learning. Uh, what other language have I tried learning? I once learned the Arabic script. Okay. I had this gigantic dictionary. I had access to this gigantic dictionary called the American Heritage Dictionary. And if you go to the American Heritage Dictionary and you open you go to the entry for alphabet, then they have this entire list of alphabets of many countries. And one of these was the Arabic alphabet, Alif, Bet, Dal, whatever it is. Yeah. So one afternoon I said, let me learn this. And in a couple of hours, I could write my name in Arabic. And I had learned enough that I could write a lot in Arabic. So, but that's just the script, not the language. The language is a very different language. So when it comes to learning a language, you have to spend several hours a day if you want to learn fast. You have to essentially immerse yourself in that environment in which the language is all you can speak in. So there are some apps that are available. I don't know what they're called. One is Rosetta Stone. I'm not sure how good it is. Another app is called Duolingo, and so on. So I think these apps are available. Many apps are available these days. Some of them could be really good. That's what I could suggest for you. Pick a good learning app and spend a few hours per day, at least a couple of hours a day, practicing and getting better progressively. But apart from that, I don't have any personal experience with the Chinese language. So I could not go beyond giving you this general philosophy of learning a new language. All right. Bobby says, "Don't you watch English film? Sorry, Indian films. Don't you watch Indian films? There certainly are some good ones here and there. The most recent example is 12th Fail. I haven't seen 12th Fail. I have become so disillusioned with Bollywood that I just don't watch Hindi movies anymore. Which is the last movie I saw? I think it was Bahubali Part 2. But that's not a Bollywood movie. It's a movie from the South. I did watch RRR on the small screen because there was so much hype about it, especially in the West. It was okay, not bad, but there was a bit of secularism in that as well. Yeah, that is something just turns me off. This forced secularism. What else? I watched Uri a few years ago, and what else? Can't remember much more. I'm sure there are good movies here and there, but because of the overall lack of standards and low standards in Bollywood, I just don't feel like watching. I mean, there was a time when I used to watch Bollywood movies. As a kid, I watched many Bollywood movies from those days. Uh, I remember once I was in the US for a few months, and I watched. We had DVDs those days. Me and some of my colleagues, and we watched this movie Dil Chahta Hai like I don't know 5 6 times. Wasn't a bad movie. That's like I don't know. That movie was what 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. There have been good movies, but the ratio of bad movies to good movies is just way too large today in Bollywood. There's nothing interesting from my perspective. You know, and when they make historical movies, they make something like Mohenjo-daro, which I hear was a ghastly movie. And then they make Jodha Akbar, which is even ghastlier, and God knows what else. I would love to watch good movies, really, but yeah, I don't these days. What kind of PC or PS games have you played? I had a PlayStation 2 all these years ago. Um, I played a car crash game. There was this game called, I forget the name of the game. It was about car racing. You are in a race in a car and you go around a racetrack. You can choose any racetrack you want. Silver Lake was there, and whatever the places. And it was more about crashing cars. Unless you really spend many hours of it, then you become really good at that. So there was that. There was something called Dynasty Warriors and some other games. There was the PlayStation 2 that I had. Today you have PlayStation 4, I think, or 5. I don't know which one it is today. And PC games. I have played Tetris. I have played something called Snood. I've played Minesweeper, and that's about it. I'm not a big gaming guy. That's about it. Do I like Tarantino movies? Pulp Fiction is great. Pulp Fiction is one of the great movies. Tarantino is overall great. Stylistically great. Story is great. Some of the movies are a little self-indulgent, but overall his movies are great. Pulp Fiction, obviously, one of his great movies. What else? Uh, why do I forget the names of movies? Pulp Fiction, great. What's that movie from night to day or something? A movie that looks like a western, but it becomes a vampire movie. That was kind of weird, but kind of good. Yeah, I've seen most Tarantino movies, and I am a big fan of Quentin Tarantino. There was something called Four Rooms. Four Rooms. That was a good movie, and many more. Ansh says, as-tu regardé le film de création? Je n'ai pas regardé le film de création. Je ne sais pas c'est quoi. Sorry. Okay. Tarun says, do you believe in the Ramayana? I believe it was a historical event. I believe it was. But our archaeologists have not done enough to investigate the historicity. So we are still at the point. They ensure that they will not go and do their job, and that's why we don't have any hard evidence of when it happened and where it happened. I mean, go and investigate the Ram Setu, go and investigate. Obviously, Ayodhya is all destroyed. The ancient city of Ayodhya, which existed 1,000 years ago, has been totally destroyed by the Turks. So a lot of the evidence has been destroyed and all. But overall, to answer your question, I am convinced these are all historical events, which happened a long, long, long time ago, maybe several thousand years ago for sure. Siddharth says, "What should be our road to becoming a superpower?" Okay, so you want to fly. Before you fly, you have to run very fast, sprint. But before you sprint, you have to be able to run at a medium pace. And before you have to know how to run at a medium pace, you need to know how to jog, run slowly. And before you know how to jog, you have to know how to walk. So superpower is flying, but we are now beginning to jog for the first time ever in the past 1,000 years. So let's take it step by step. Superpower is 70 years from now, 50 years from now. I don't know why Indians are obsessed with this superpower status. It's about status. No, right now India should be a great power in the Indian Ocean region in the next 10 to 15 years. That is far from being a superpower. But for now, that will do. And then work on the economy. And eventually you may reach the superpower status by 2050, 2060 or so. It's not something that will happen next year or next week or whatever. It's a long process, but we are on track towards becoming a genuine great power. There are lots of hurdles in the way, but it takes time. So let's not talk about being a superpower. That's only one superpower. You know why they are a superpower? The United States, they have more than 800 extraterritorial military bases outside of their territory. That's why they are a superpower. And also because they control the world's reserve currency, the US dollar. Okay. So that is something that you can aspire for in 50 years, perhaps. So let's be realistic and take it one step at a time. When you want to climb Mount Everest, you don't look at the top. You look at the next 100 meters and you ensure that you do it step by step and do those 100 meters really well. Once you do that, you look at the next 100 meters and you do that over and over and over and over again. And if you keep on doing it properly, you're going to reach there, but it'll take time. So there you have it. Okay, let's take one or two more questions and then we will be done. Update on the Kharkiv offensive by Russia. It's something that's ongoing. The situation is very fluid right now, so let's not comment about it. Maybe in a week's time, when we have proper data and information on what's happening, then maybe I'll speak about this. When something is happening in real time, there's no point really commenting. Okay, the Russians have initiated an offensive. They may want to take Kharkiv, the city. You want to see where it is? I can do that. Okay, let's find out where Kharkiv is. Okay, Ukraine and Kharkiv is over here. So you see here? So they had almost taken the city 2 years ago, the Russians, but then they went when they let it go. So now they may be on the verge, or they may be positioning themselves to take this city. And as you can see, it's not really far from the Russian border, so it's not really that hard for them to take it if they want to. So there's an offensive going on right now, and it's too early to comment about it because it's a work in progress. It's a fluid situation. Maybe in a week's time, I could take this question up, and we will see. Okay, Red says, who are the Wusun people? I don't know. I'm sorry. I look it up, but right now I don't have an answer because I'm not aware of it. Sorry. Okay. It's a mystery where he's taking these questions from. Don't Twitter hashtag questions count. Okay, I am looking at the YouTube live chat. That's what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at Twitter right now because I only have one screen in front of me. I cannot look at seven different screens. I have one screen here. I have one screen here for the map over here, which you can't see, but I'm putting the map on the screen. I cannot take questions from two or three different sources. So I'm not doing it from Twitter right now. You can view this on Twitter, but I'm not taking questions from Twitter. It's only from the YouTube live chat. And if you look at the title of this live stream, it says Ask Me Anything live chat. So, yeah. Okay. Speak about politics in Goa. I have absolutely no idea about politics in Goa. Very sorry. I don't look at India's internal politics. Mansi asks a good question. Are you doing research in your field currently? Currently, I'm not doing research in physics currently. And that is something I'm very dissatisfied about. So, it's something I do need to get back into. Active research in physics. But right now, I'm not doing that. And thanks for the reminder. Appreciate that. Okay. Mm, Pratyush says, OpenAI launched ChatGPT 4.0, and I think we are cooked. What's your reaction on this development? Look, new and more powerful language learning models are going to be released every few months, not just by OpenAI, but from the others as well. Everybody's going to have one. So yeah, that's where we are. It's gonna the pace of these technological improvements is gonna keep on increasing, and maybe at some point in time we will have AGI, artificial general intelligence, and then we are cooked. It is the singularity. It is what Skynet, the Skynet moment. We'll see. Let's see. Nothing we can do about it where we are. Last question for today. Aditya says, your views on India dominating chess. Yeah, brilliant. I'm loving it. We have Vaishali, the latest grandmaster. Her brother Pragnananda is doing very well. Gukesh recently won the candidates championships. Candidates tournament is going to challenge Ding Liren, the current champion, at the end of this year. Lots of really young Indians are coming and dominating the field. Pragnananda has beaten Magnus Carlsen, the world number one, multiple times, at least twice that I can think of. It's great to see. Wonderful. And the old grandmaster Vishwanathan Anand is still around. So it is great to see this, and we're going to see more of this. We're going to see a whole tsunami of Indians dominating not just chess but all sports in this coming decade. India is going to be a sports superpower in this coming decade. Watch out for it. All right, that's it for today. We have crossed 2 hours 13 minutes, so that is it. I will see you in the next live stream, which is gonna be most likely this Friday, if I'm not mistaken. Until then, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your viewership, and I will see you very soon in the next live stream. Until then, take care. Bye bye. And don't forget to keep raising your standards.